What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so former NBA player Penny Hardaway was recently on Draymond Green's podcast. It's entitled The Draymond Green Show with Baron Davis. And they talked about a multitude of different subjects on that podcast. But in the conclusion of his appearance on that podcast, he was asked to name his top 5 point guards in NBA history. And it was one of the picks that some people are surprised at, as well as omissions. Penny didn't have any trouble in giving the first 4 point guards on his list, but he appeared to struggle in naming a 5th. So Draymond and Baron tried to help him by enumerating some great players who played at that position. Specifically, Draymond named John Stockton, while Baron suggested Steve Nash and Kevin Johnson. However, Penny Hardaway decided to go in a different direction and name himself. He said, quote, "It's so many great ones, bro. I got to pick one more, though. I know I'm in that top 5. I'll just say, and me. That's why I'll leave it." And to expand on his top 5 list, I believe it's Magic Johnson at number 1, Steph Curry at number 2, and let's see, I'm trying to remember. It was Magic Johnson number 1, Steph Curry number 3. Excuse me, Steph Curry number 2, Gary Payton number 3, Jason Kidd number 4, and Penny Hardaway himself at number 5. Now, anybody that's been following my channel for any number of time or length of time now, any number of years, know that I have a very high opinion of Penny Hardaway. I watched the man play. And from a talent perspective, he may be the most talented point guard I've ever seen. From a talent perspective, I'll tell you why. Because I said this before, he could play at that position in a multitude of ways that I haven't seen before or since. No, he couldn't shoot like Steph Curry. No. He couldn't shoot like Steph Curry. He wasn't the most athletic point guard I've ever seen. But I'm telling you, you can't just look at the stats, because he played along Shaq during his best years, so Shaq cut into his offensive numbers, and his prime was very limited because of injuries. But he could dish like Magic Johnson. People forget he was getting Magic Johnson comparisons. He could play like Isaiah Thomas. He could score like Michael Jordan when need be. He could go to the rack. He had hops. He could post you up. He had the mid-range game. He developed the 3-ball. He could facilitate. He could play like Magic Johnson when need be. He could be a floor general. He could be a primary scorer. His defense, which was never bad, was improving. You know what I'm saying? I've seen him lock guys up. I'm telling you, from a talent perspective, if we were just going peak talent perspective, I'm not mad at him for putting himself in this top 5 list. But we got to be realistic here. Injuries ruined his career. So on good conscience, you can't put him, at least in my opinion, on a top 5 all-time list. I know he means from a talent perspective, like, hey, I feel like I'm just as good, if not better than these guys at my peak, and I agree with that sentiment. But, you know, Penny only had like a peak of what, 3 years maybe? So because of that, I can never in good conscience put him on a top 5 all-time point guard list. Now, you know, it's been a while since I updated my list. I need to do that. Matter of fact, let me see something. How long has it been since I updated this thing? So, I haven't updated my point guard list in 4 years, but my top 5 list as of 2020 was Magic Johnson, Oscar Robertson, Isaiah Thomas, Steph Curry, John Stockton, who, by the way, is missing on his all-time list. Now, since then, obviously, I'd have to put Steph Curry up. It's hard for me to argue not putting him ahead of Isaiah Thomas now. Even though I still believe Oscar Robertson was a more dominant basketball player, I can't ignore Steph Curry's accomplishments. I can't ignore the 4 championships. I can't ignore the league MVP, 2 league MVPs, actually, excuse me. Can't ignore the scoring top. I have to put him at number 2. So Steph Curry goes up to number 2. If I had to update this, Oscar go down to number 3. Isaiah's number 4. And I guess Stockton would stay at number 5. I'm trying to think. I just don't think Russell Westbrook's a top 5 point guard. And I love Russ, but I got to be honest. Chris Paul is not top 5 to me. So that's pretty much probably the only changes I would make. I would probably raise up Steph Curry. But yeah, man, in my opinion, from a historical standpoint, I mean, how do you put Penny all time now ahead of the guys I just named? How do you put him ahead of Bob Cousy? How do you put him ahead of J.C. Kidd? How the hell do you put him ahead of Steve Nash? How the hell do you put him ahead of Walt Clyde Frazier? From a historical standpoint, how do you put him ahead of Nate Archibald? Kevin Johnson? How do you do that? I don't think you can. Not from a historical standpoint of career accomplishments, longevity. When you include those things, I just can't put him ahead of them. Now, if you're talking peak, then that's a different conversation. If we're talking about peak, then yeah, I put Penny Hardaway up there on that list. But if you're talking about just accomplishments and longevity and body of work, I can't do that. I mean, because when you talk about playoff performance, Penny Hardaway has an NBA Finals appearance. I don't know how many. Let me see something. How many All-Star selections does Penny Hardaway have? Let's look at his resume. I want to say he has something around 4 All-Star appearances. Let's look at this. So Penny Hardaway played from 1993 to 2007. Now, you might say to yourself, if you're younger, well, that's a 14-year career. Yeah, but in the very late 90s, he suffered from serious injuries, in particular to his knees. Matter of fact, you could argue from 1996 onward, he had knee problems. But they seriously began to affect his explosiveness, his quickness, which left him a good player, but not the same guy from post-2000 onward. He was basically a really good role player. And then I would say after 2003, he wasn't even really a great role player anymore. It was kind of like a average player, 4-time All-Star. I thought it was about right. He was a 4-time NBA All-Star, 2-time All-NBA first team, All-NBA third team, NBA All-Rookie first team 1994. When you include college, consensus first team All-American 93, excuse me. 2-time Great Midwest Player of the Year 92-93. Number 25 retired by the Memphis Tigers. First team Parade All-American 1990. Scored a little over 10,000 points in his career for 15 points per game. 3,000 rebounds, 4.5 rebounds, 3,500 assists, 5 assists per night. Did win Olympic gold in Atlanta, so that means a lot. He won Olympic gold. That's when he was at the peak of his powers. Nah, I can't say he's a top 5 point guard. I would be absolutely capping, in my opinion, if I said that he's a top 5 point guard based on his resume. You know what I'm saying? But like I said, if you're talking about his abilities as a basketball player in his prime and peak, then we're having a different conversation. It'll be like saying Bo Jackson's a top 5 all-time running back. Now, if you're talking about from a talent, potential perspective, yeah, I can see the argument. But if you're talking accomplishments, then, we really can't say that. So that's kind of how I look at Penny Hardaway. But anyway, that's all I got to say about it. Tell me what you guys think.